On the contrary, one of the great things about the human rights framework is exactly that the rights are defined by those who hold them, namely all of us. But that doesn't mean that knowing these international standards isn't important. As Martin Luther King said, knowing your rights is essential to enforcing them. Human rights and human rights violations are experienced in intensely personal ways. I was with a 14-year-old student last year, Malik Gardner, as he gave testimony to the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination in Geneva. He told his story of discrimination and abuse in the school system, and he finished by saying, "I don't know what all these articles in the treaty are, but I know that my rights have been violated." You could see that the UN experts on the committee got what he was talking about. And I'm sure many of you could do the same. You might not know the treaty articles, but you sure as heck know in your gut when your rights or the rights of your clients are being violated. But what made Malik's testimony in Geneva so much more powerful was that it didn't stand alone as just an anecdotal example of a violation. His testimony was backed by the report that hundreds of activists and lawyers deeply versed in the human rights framework have produced, and that did name, article by article, each right and the many violations of those rights that had occurred over the past 8 years. So today I'm here to say what I mean when I say housing is a human right. And I'm going to talk about those international standards because I believe that we have to change the conversation that we're having about housing in America today from one of, oh, it's a shame that so many people are losing their homes, to one that says Americans' human rights to housing are being violated, and the government is obligated to act to protect it. And I'm going to do this trying to talk about the standards, but also mixing in some stories of these violations, of successes of some of our partner organizations, because if these rights remain just on paper in Geneva, then they're meaningless. We give them meaning by what we do to apply them to our lives and to our laws here at home. Now, when we talk about human rights in the U.S., most people either think of abuses abroad, or if they are thinking about the U.S.'s actions, then they're thinking about torture at Abu Ghraib or Guantanamo. But I'm going to propose that what happened at Guantanamo isn't actually so far away from what happens to millions of Americans every day on the streets here across the country. Think about it. If I told you that someone was forced to sleep on a cold concrete slab, kicked, humiliated, exposed to the elements, threatened by law enforcement, attacked by dogs, didn't know when they would get their next meal, and were generally deprived of their basic human dignity, would you be able to say whether I was talking about a person at Guantanamo or a person on the streets of America? There are some differences, but why is it that when the government allows the conditions to happen to one of these victims, it's a human rights abuse, but when it happens to the other, it's just a question of economic policy? The outcome is the same: broken people who feel that humanity is failing them. Homelessness is torture, and the ones who create our economic and housing policies should be held equally as accountable as those who drafted the torture memos and allowed these things to happen. I'm not making this comparison lightly. This has a very personal meaning to me, because my father himself grew up as homeless. And even more than homeless, he was stateless. My dad was born in a refugee camp in the middle of World War II. His father, my grandfather, had fought in the Estonian army against the Germans as they came through Estonia on their way towards Moscow. He was captured by the Germans and forced into the German army, and then when the Russians came back through Estonia on their way towards Berlin, my he had to give to his mother so she could bake him cake. The rest meant that he got to have sugar on his oatmeal for the next couple months, and maybe share some with his older brother. He doesn't remember starving, but if you look at the two of us together, his arms and torso are actually longer than mine, but his legs are shorter, so he obviously missed a growth spurt because of the malnutrition problems in the camp. And the effects were more than just physical. To this day, although he lives a relatively comfortable life and has now lived in the house where I grew up in for over 30 years, he can't throw away cardboard boxes or bags because he never knows when he might have to move again. I spent 2 full days over the last Christmas holiday cleaning out my old room at my house that was literally hip deep in boxes, my old toys, random pieces of appliances that hadn't worked in years, and I threw out over 50 pounds of cardboard boxes alone. My dad makes all sorts of contraptions and cobbles together bookshelves from various pieces of scrap wood, not because my parents can't afford something new, but simply because he just can't imagine letting anything go to waste. I grew up thinking this was normal. That every family probably lives similarly sparingly, but more and more I kind of see how even though he lives in the middle of this American middle-class consumer society, his mind is in many ways still back in those camps. And I'm not talking about this because my dad's experience is extraordinary. And on the contrary, it is just normal, everyday life for so many people living here in the U.S. Whether they're being forced out of their homes because of an actual war in their land, like my father was, or they're feeling the effects of a long-term economic war affected not incidentally by the huge amount of spending that we do on preparing for and fighting other wars. Homeless persons in America are refugees in our own land. And just as international treaties protect the rights of refugees outside their countries, human rights treaties protect the rights of those living here inside our own borders. And thinking about the aftermath of World War II puts us in a good place to start the conversation about human rights, because that's where the international human rights system got started. In the midst of the Depression in the early days of World War II, Franklin Roosevelt said that we were fighting for 4 freedoms, based the Atlantic Charter on freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from fear, and freedom from want. In 1944, just before the end of the war, he affirmed this concept again when he declared in his State of the Union address that the U.S. had adopted a second Bill of Rights, including the rights to a job at a decent wage, to health care, to Social Security, and of course, the right to a decent